The entire entertainment industry fell into silence the moment the footage surfaced, and within hours that silence turned into chaos that no one could control because what appeared on screen was not just a video, it was a moment that changed everything for two of the most watched stars in the C-drama world, and it all began with a secret that was never meant to be seen by the public and a truth that was never meant to escape into daylight. And now everything is collapsing in real time, and you need to keep watching this story unfold, because what happens next will completely change how you see everything you thought you knew about them. It started with a grainy recording that appeared without warning across multiple platforms showing Wu Lei in a quiet private setting standing beside someone who is never meant to be identified so easily, but the internet does what it always does, and within minutes every detail was being analyzed frame by frame until the truth became unavoidable because the engagement ring was visible and the atmosphere between them was unmistakably intimate, and that single detail was enough to ignite a wave of speculation that spread faster than anyone could contain. By the time the footage reached production circles, Xiao Lucy was already on set for a high-budget drama that was supposed to be her biggest career step yet, but everything changed the moment she saw the video because according to those present her entire expression shifted in a way that no script could prepare for, and the energy on set immediately felt different, as if the air itself had become heavier and more uncertain. She did not speak at first, and that silence became the most powerful reaction in the room because everyone understood that something irreversible had just entered her life and her work at the same time, and the timing made it even more overwhelming. Because this was not just any project, it was a production that depended on stability and emotional continuity, and now both were slipping away at the same time. As the day continued, Zhao Lucy reportedly distanced herself from scenes she was scheduled to film, and the changes were subtle at first, but quickly became noticeable because she was no longer engaging with the same emotional energy that made her performances so strong, and instead she seemed to be carrying something unspoken that followed her through every moment on set. Crew members began noticing that she would pause longer between takes and stare into space, as if trying to separate reality from something that had suddenly become too loud to ignore, and every time someone approached her she responded politely but briefly, as though conserving energy for thoughts she was not ready to share. Then came the moment that shocked everyone involved in the production because she requested to step away from the project entirely, and the reason given was not framed as conflict or disagreement, but as a personal decision rooted in self-respect and emotional clarity, and that single decision sent shockwaves through the entire production team because the drama was already heavily invested in her presence, and her departure meant more than just a casting change, it meant disruption at every level. Behind-the-scenes conversations reportedly escalated quickly as producers attempted to stabilize the situation, but Zhao Lucy remained firm in her position, and those close to the production described her as calm but unshakable, as if she had already processed everything internally long before speaking it out loud. At the same time, the leaked engagement footage of Wu Lei continued circulating, and with every replay the public narrative became more complicated because some insisted the video proved a hidden relationship while others argued it was taken out of context. But the emotional impact it created could not be denied because it reshaped how audiences viewed both stars instantly. In the middle of this storm, Zhao Lucy found herself at the center of speculation that she never publicly responded to, and instead, she chose silence, which only intensified public curiosity, because silence in moments like this becomes its own form of statement, and people began interpreting it in ways that added even more pressure to an already overwhelming situation. Those familiar with the production environment described the atmosphere as tense and emotionally fractured because scenes that once flowed smoothly now required repeated pauses and adjustments, as if the emotional continuity of the entire project had been disrupted by something invisible but powerful. As days passed, Zhao Lucy was seen less frequently on set, and when she did appear she maintained professionalism but avoided extended interaction, and it became clear that her decision was not impulsive, but something deeply considered, because every step she took suggested finality rather than hesitation. Meanwhile, the leaked footage continued to dominate online discussion, and Wu Lei became the subject of intense scrutiny as audiences attempted to piece together timelines and emotional connections that may or may not reflect reality. But the damage of perception was already done because once an image spreads at that scale, it begins to form its own truth regardless of origin. Inside the production team, there were attempts to restructure schedules and adjust filming strategies, but none of it could fully replace the presence that Zhao Lusi had brought to the project, and that absence became increasingly noticeable as production continued under strain. Eventually, the situation reached a point where continuation without resolution felt impossible, and discussions shifted from managing schedules to managing emotional fallout because the story had grown beyond a simple production issue and turned into something much larger, involving reputation, public expectation, and personal boundaries. Xiao Lucy reportedly made her final decision in a private meeting where she expressed that continuing would compromise her emotional stability and her sense of integrity, and those who were present described the moment as quiet but definitive, with no room for negotiation or reversal. After that meeting, she left the project completely, and her departure marked the end of what was supposed to be a major career milestone, but also the beginning of a new wave of speculation about what truly happened behind the scenes and whether the leaked footage was the beginning of a much larger hidden story, or simply an unrelated coincidence that collided with her life at the worst possible moment. Wu Lei remained silent throughout the unfolding situation, and that silence added another layer of mystery because without confirmation or denial, the narrative continued to grow in unpredictable directions, shaped entirely by public interpretation rather than verified fact. As for Zhao Lucy, her decision began to be viewed in multiple ways depending on perspective. Some saw it as a bold act of self-protection, while others saw it as a response to emotional turbulence triggered by events outside her control. But what remained consistent across all interpretations was that her departure changed the trajectory of the production and left a lasting impact that could not be easily reversed. In the end, what emerged from this entire situation was not a clear answer, but a complex web of emotion, perception, and unanswered questions that continue to circulate through entertainment circles and online communities. And as the footage remains online and discussions continue to evolve, one thing becomes increasingly clear: that in the world of fame, even a single moment captured without context can reshape careers, relationships, and realities in ways no script could ever fully prepare for. The production set was still recovering from the shock of Zhao Lucy's sudden departure when something even more unexpected happened the next morning, something that made everyone realize that the situation was far from over and that what had already unfolded was only the surface of a much deeper storm that no one had fully understood yet. The leaked engagement video of Wu Lei was still circulating online, still being replayed, still being analyzed frame by millions of viewers who could not agree on what they were actually seeing, and every new interpretation only made the situation more complicated, because the more people watched it, the more the narrative changed, and the less certain anything became. But behind the scenes, something else was happening that no one outside the industry was aware of. Zhao Lucy had not simply left the project emotionally or quietly. She had officially stepped into complete distance from the production, and her team had begun handling communications in a way that suggested finality rather than temporary absence, and that alone was enough to send new waves of confusion through the entire entertainment circle. Meanwhile, Wu Lei remained completely silent, and that silence became its own form of pressure, because when one half of a public storm disappears from conversation, the other half becomes amplified beyond control, and speculation begins to replace facts in ways that no one can stop. On the third day after her departure, Zhao Lucy was seen briefly at a private studio entrance, but there was no announcement, no interview, and no explanation, and those who saw her described her as calm but emotionally distant, as if she had already separated herself from everything that was being said online. Inside the industry, conversations began shifting from speculation about the video to speculation about her decision, because it was no longer just about what was seen but about what it triggered and why it triggered such a decisive exit from a high-profile production. Then came the moment that changed the direction of the entire situation again. A private internal statement reportedly surfaced among production staff, not for public release, but circulated enough to leak into online discussions, and it suggested that Zhao Lucy's departure had been influenced not just by emotional reaction, but by a deeper concern about how public perception was beginning to distort reality beyond control. According to those discussions, she felt that continuing the project while the engagement video remained unresolved in public discourse would place her in a position where her performance and personal life would be constantly merged by audiences regardless of truth or intent. And that realization reportedly became the final breaking point. As this information spread, fans became divided into multiple interpretations, with some supporting her decision as an act of protecting her mental and emotional stability, while others believed it was a reaction shaped by misunderstanding and timing rather than direct involvement. But what no one expected was what happened next involving Wu Lei. After days of silence, he finally released a short indirect message through his agency, not addressing the video directly, but acknowledging that recent public discussions had created misunderstandings that were affecting both personal and professional environments, and asking for restraint until clarity could be properly provided. That statement did not confirm or deny the engagement footage, but it changed the energy of the entire situation because it introduced the possibility that the narrative being built online might not reflect the full truth. And that shift immediately reignited global attention. Meanwhile, Zhao Lusi remained completely out of the production environment and instead focused on internal discussions with her team about future projects and restructuring her schedule in a way that would distance her from ongoing controversy until the situation stabilized. But even in her absence, her influence on the project she left behind was still visible because scenes that had already been filmed with her now carried a different emotional weight for the production team, who had to continue working under the shadow of her sudden exit. Crew members described the atmosphere as strangely incomplete, as if the story they were building had lost a central emotional anchor, and every attempt to continue felt like reconstructing something that had already changed shape. Then came a turning point no one predicted. A longer, clearer version of the engagement footage began circulating privately within industry circles, and while still unverified, it introduced details that contradicted earlier assumptions and suggested that what viewers interpreted as an engagement might have been part of a completely different private family gathering that had been misrepresented through selective framing. This new interpretation immediately fractured public opinion again and shifted attention from certainty back into confusion. And at the center of all this, Xiao Lucy remained silent. But silence this time was different. It was no longer seen as avoidance. It was seen as control. Control over her narrative, control over her emotional boundaries, and control over how much of herself she allowed into a situation that was rapidly becoming bigger than any one individual. Days later, she released a brief, carefully worded statement through her representatives, not addressing Wu Lei directly, but confirming her decision to step away from the project due to personal boundaries, professional direction, and the need for emotional clarity in an environment that had become overwhelmingly intense. There was no blame in her statement, no accusation, no confirmation of rumors, only distance. And that distance said everything she needed it to say. The production eventually announced a restructuring of the drama, replacing schedules and adjusting storylines to accommodate her exit, and while filming continued, the energy of the project had permanently changed because what once felt like a rising career milestone had now become a reminder of how quickly perception and reality can collide in the entertainment world. Wu Lei later issued a final clarification through official channels stating that the circulating engagement footage had been taken out of context and was unrelated to any romantic confirmation, and that his focus remained on work and professionalism moving forward. That statement finally settled part of the storm, but not all of it, because what had already spread could not be fully reversed, and what had already been felt could not be fully erased. In the end, Zhao Lucy's decision was not remembered as just a departure from a drama. It became a moment that exposed how fragile fame can be when private moments, public interpretation, and emotional truth collide in a world that never stops watching. And Wu Lei's situation became a reminder that in the age of instant circulation, even a single unclear image can reshape narratives before truth has any chance to speak. As for Zhao Lucy, she moved forward, quietly choosing projects that aligned with her personal boundaries and avoiding anything that could blur the line between her real life and her performances again. And the production she left behind continued without her, but never quite escaped the shadow of the moment everything changed. Because some stories do not end when the cameras stop rolling. They end when the silence finally becomes louder than the rumor. And in this case, the silence lasted far longer than anyone expected.